We're back at For the Record on Radio Entrepreneurs on our special lawyers show, and I'm with our esteemed colleague, Marc Furman of Tarlow, Breed, Hart, and Rodgers. And Marc, thank you for sponsoring the show, and thank you for being here today.
Great to be with you, Marc.
Thank you. Continuing on having the top attorneys all over New England, we have Euripides Dalmanieras, who's a senior partner at Foley Hoag. Euripides, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Euripides, you're the chair of your firm's closely held business and shareholders dispute group, and you do a lot of sophisticated work in litigation with businesses, as well as the bankruptcy that goes in with closely held corporations and all the specific business bankruptcies. And I know that there's some very timely issues that are of concern with what's going on in the market. Can you talk about some of the recent issues relating to business bankruptcies?
Sure. So in the last 60 days or so, we've had a spate of high-profile companies file for bankruptcy that are in the food and consumer products area. So just recently you had Pier 1, you've had NPC Restaurants, which own Wendy's and Pizza Huts. You've had the two largest domestic milk producers, Borden and Dean Foods, and Dean Foods also produces a lot of consumer goods.
Correct.
As well. And I don't think it's a coincidence that you're seeing the filing of these types of bankruptcies at the same time you're hearing that consumer debt, personal debt, is reaching the levels that we haven't seen in 10, 12 years. And although by no means is the economy generally in financial distress, I do think that the growth is concentrated and continues to be concentrated on the coasts and in various metropolitan areas and some suburban areas in the middle of the country. But there appear to be, and I think they're going to continue to be, large parts of middle America that are not getting the benefit of this national growth. And those people, as consumers, are going to have to stop purchasing goods, and you're already seeing that happen, and it's beginning to affect these companies that traditionally their bread and butter was selling to middle America.
Right. Now, what's interesting is Wayfair recently announced a slew of layoffs, and what's interesting, because I'm in the staffing business, there was just so much hiring going on, and all of a sudden they're doing this.
Yes.
Bose is doing some massive worldwide layoffs. So it's interesting. You're going for a lot of employee hires to now the trending of employee layoffs, and obviously product is not being sold like anticipated.
And I think that's right. And I think at least with Wayfair, a lot of their investors are sophisticated people in the private equity space, and they may be seeing, some dark clouds on the horizon, and they're telling their management teams, look, we need to prepare for this. It's time to cut back. Now, they may have made some mistaken assumptions in growing too fast, and so they're ratcheting back, and they're trying to correct that. That's, of course, part of the calculation when you lay off large swaths of people. But I think there might be something more fundamental that folks are seeing.
Do you also think in your profession that you're now seeing lawyers, and you're doing that on behalf of clients, using business bankruptcies more? Because it just seems we're hearing about it more. For example, the Boy Scouts filed a bankruptcy recently. COSI, a local business here, they had been in bankruptcy, then they come out, and now they're back in.
Yeah. Well, generally, no. Not yet. And actually, the amount of filings are a lot fewer in general than one would think, even in the last 10 years. In large part because there's been limited amounts of what we call DIP financing, debtor in possession financing, to fund the kind of bankruptcies on the scale that we saw during the 2000s and 1990s. and I'm going to turn to those bankruptcies you mentioned specifically, but one of the phenomena of the Great Recession from like 2008 to 2011 is you didn't see, well, you saw relatively few actual reorganizations and relatively few bankruptcies that were administered by debtor in possession lenders for long periods of time, because there just wasn't that much financing around. The shock to the economy in '08 was so great that there weren't shops and firms even wanting to lend money
Correct.
to companies in bankruptcy, which was much different than the 2001, 2002, 2003 downturn. Now, you're seeing that change a little bit. There are other firms out there now looking for those higher returns if they can get them, but there's not the critical mass that we saw 20 years ago. As a result, you're getting, in general, fewer bankruptcies being filed. You're seeing more out of court workouts and the like. Now, with respect to the Boy Scouts, they had a specific issue that put them into bankruptcy that didn't really involve the operations of
Right.
their underlying business. They
Right.
had that the potential tort liability. Very similar to Purdue Pharma and the Sacklers. Again, that business is still booming. I mean, they're still selling, opioids hand over fist.
Right.
There was this massive potential liability out there that caused them to file into bankruptcy. So those are sort of special circumstances.
Are you seeing, it just doesn't seem like we've seen the special circumstances like this. As soon as these things happen, immediately, because maybe there's a wave, like whether it was the Boy Scouts or in the pharma cases, there's an immediate need, because whether it's driven by shareholders or concern about being able to deal with these cases.
Yeah, so some of these matters are industry specific. So, Purdue Pharma isn't the only company in that space that has filed for bankruptcy.
Correct.
It's by far the biggest and the most prominent ones, but there have been others. The last, if people can think back, the asbestos liability forced a bunch of companies to go through there. That wiped out an industry. So there have been, instances with potential tort liability pushing whole industries into bankruptcy, and that'll continue. As matters evolve and liability issues ripen, you're going to see that affect various industries. But when you're talking about the COSIs of the world and the NPC restaurants, which own Wendy's and Pizza Hut, they're going into bankruptcy because they can't pay off their debt because they're not selling enough fast food and sandwiches.
Right.
And then the question that needs to be asked is, who's not buying this stuff anymore?
Right.
It's not necessarily people in Boston,
Right.
but it's folks in other parts of the country. And then the issue is, okay, why aren't they buying that stuff anymore?
Do you feel that the tariffs that were put on are affecting it? Because, like, for example, I know with Dean, that's obviously they, as you know, a
Yeah.
long time ago bought Gorelick Farms, and
Yep.
it seems to be happening a lot in the food industry.
Yeah, it might. I'm sure. I'm certain it's a factor. Their costs have gone up, no doubt about it. But also consumer tastes have changed. So it's hard to allocate the responsibility to the various factors. But yeah, you're absolutely right. That's definitely had an impact on various industries.
Now, do you work with businesses, because as you represent employers, to counsel them on some of these issues, whether or not they should get into these weeds in terms of filings?
We counsel people all the time. Oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, we find ourselves counseling clients not to file for bankruptcy because anybody who's dealt with bankruptcy knows that it's not a panacea for problems, and it can open the door to other issues, especially for management. But we counsel companies in financial distress all the time about bankruptcy, receiverships, other kind of out-of-court remedies to deal with these kind of financial issues. In Massachusetts, we have, we still have a robust healthcare and high-tech companies, high-tech industries. So companies in that space there's a lot of middle market and smaller companies who have financial distress, and bankruptcy is usually not a good remedy for their problems. They usually need more creative and, is frankly, more nuanced approaches to dealing with their issues, and we counsel them on that all the time.
Excellent. Excellent. I think it's just so important, and you start with them. It's not just obviously bankruptcy, but obviously you're constantly counseling them in terms of business decisions, in terms of every step of the way.
Of course, I'm sure, and every lawyer you're going to interview today will tell you that part of the job is being a counselor and a therapist for your clients, and that's a necessary part of the job.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Euripides Dalmanieras, senior partner at Foley Hoag, thank you so much for appearing on our show today. If different businesses want to be in touch with you, not only for your counseling, but looking at their options and issues, how could they reach you?
Well, they can contact me directly. They can email me. All my contact information is public, phone number, email.
Can you share that?
Oh, yeah, sure. 617-832-3006 is my direct line.
Excellent.
And I usually pick up my own phone myself.
And your email address?
edalmani@foleyhoag.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for appearing on our show. And we are radio entrepreneurs, and I'm here with my co-host, Marc Furman of Tarlow, Breed, Hart, and Rodgers. Marc, thank you very much for being here. And we will take a break and be right back.